Blog Talk Radio.
Choices, decisions, frustrations, and pain. Knowing I'm going to forget her someday. While I still can, I'll challenge all my loved ones, every friend, to look inside their hearts and understand that I will love them. I will love them while I still can.
Well, welcome everyone to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and it's a brilliant day here in Minnesota. I don't know what the weather's like where you are, but I know we're preparing for fall already. So today we're going to just have an absolutely very exciting show. And one of my all-time favorites is going to be with us, Mr. Max Wallack, who has written with his co-author, Carolyn Given, just a brilliant book that's going to help families around the world with their struggles with dementia. But before we get into that for the first half of our show, because we always get new listeners, I want to share with you a little bit about what Alzheimer Speaks is about and why it was created. And bottom line, my mom has been struggling with memory loss and dementia for 30 years, so more than half of my life. I've been learning how to cope with this disease and how to live with it in a dignified and joyful manner. And so I developed Alzheimer Speaks, which is an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort around the world. And we do that by joining forces with all of you, those living with dementia, those caring personally for their loved ones, as well as professionals and advocates, authors, artists, from musicians and film directors to the researchers. Everybody's voice, I feel, needs to be heard. And by doing that and by having these open conversations, I firmly believe we are going to be able to remove the fear and the stigma and isolation that is so crippling to people with this disease. I know that we're making a difference, and I know that because we were honored by ShareCare and Dr. Oz as the #1 influencer online for Alzheimer's, and that in no way reflects me. That reflects all of you and the power of one joining together by your clicks and by your likes and by your shares of the radio show and the blog and the website and the YouTube channels and the Dementia Chat webinars and all of our Facebook pages. All of those small little clicks matter, because what you're doing is you are sharing the knowledge that you gain with others in need, which allows them to then share it as well. And so I encourage you to continue to do that, because with this simple mode, we are making a really strong grassroots effort to come together and really give people hope. I just don't think that we can drive people with fear any longer. Now, on today's show, you can participate in the conversation, and we would love for you to do that. All you have to do is utilize your chat box, and with that, you can go ahead and, type in a question or a comment at any time, and I will be reviewing those, throughout the show. Or you can always call in live to the show as well, and that number is 714-364-4757. Again, that's 714-364-4757. Now, before I do our introductions, I always just like to give a couple of shout-outs to some different organizations. And one, of course, I am extremely tied to is the Alzheimer's Disease International. And I just feel a close tie with them on multiple levels just because they are the organization of organizations around the world. So if you're looking for, help and support and information, you can go to Alzheimer's Disease International or www.alz.co.uk, and you'll be able to find what's close in your area. Or maybe you need another organization, needs to be developed, and you can be part of that. Music First with Choral Health. Of course, I'm a firm believer that music is extremely powerful for all of us throughout our life, and it can be utilized very well with dementia as well. They have a wonderful app called Music First. It's portable, but they are something I think you should check into if you haven't already. And they are just at www.coralhealth.com, Choral Health. And then, of course, for people looking for a study, there's a TAO study being done by Alzheimer's Studies. And you can just go to alzheimerstudies.com, or you can find them on my website as well by going to the sponsorship page. And then the Lewy Body Association. Lewy Body is a little bit different form of dementia, and there's some specialties that go with that. So you can always go to lbda.org, lbda.org, and the Frontal Temporal Lobe Association is going to be joining us as well, and I'll be getting their information up on the site. And I would be amiss if I didn't mention the Purple Angel Project, which Norm McNamara has launched and is now the global symbol for dementia. I really encourage people to be part of that awareness. It's a real respectful thing. And one of the problems I think we're going to have is if everybody decides to make up their own symbol, it's just confusing for the public. And we need a consistent symbol globally because, we deal with people around the world all the time. People just don't live in one little town anymore. So for organizations out there that are listening, I hope you really take that to heart. Join the Purple Angel, be part of that global push, and then differentiate yourself in a different fashion. But make it easy for the public and for your staff to know what the sign is for dementia. I would love to introduce you now to Max Wallack. He is an absolutely incredible kid, and I shouldn't say kid. He's 17 years old, and he's a junior at Boston University, as well as a researcher in molecular psychiatry and aging laboratory at the Boston University of Medicine. He was a caregiver for his great-grandmother, who also had dementia. And in 2008, this man founded PuzzlesToRemember organization, which is a 501c3, which means it's a charity organization. And that organization has supplied over 23,000 puzzles to Alzheimer's facilities around the world. Max is a member of the American Association for Geriatric Psychiatry. He gives research presentations at national conferences and has been published in respected journals in the field of Alzheimer's. He's received too many awards to even start to rattle off right now. And he is, of course, the author and co-author of this wonderful new book that just came out called Why Did Grandma Put Her Underwear in the Refrigerator? Welcome, Max. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, I'm thrilled to death to have you on the show today because I adore and I have just been an admirer of all you have accomplished in such a short period of time and at such a young age. And so it's quite an honor to be able to speak to you and have you on our show here today. Let me go ahead and introduce your co-author, Carolyn Given. Carolyn is an experienced caregiver herself. She also is an acclaimed middle and high school educator with a particular interest in intergenerational programming. Prior to her teaching career, she served in her town's Council on Aging as the director and later became a cover story writer and editor for the Senior Advocate, which is now called the 50-Plus Advocate newspaper, which is a Massachusetts-based mature market publication. Most recently, she was the recipient of an award for the Soul Making Keats literary competition sponsored by the National League of American Pen Women. Her first-person humor essay can be found at Carolyn Given writer.blogspot.com. And through her caregiving roles, Carolyn can relate to many frustrations of the healthcare system and communicating with providers adequately, and sadly, it seems kind of universal regarding a person's diagnosis. So welcome, Carolyn.
Well, thank you very much, Lori, and thank you for all that you do. It's very, very important and empowering to be able to give voice to so many people affected by this disease.
Well, I'm thrilled that you're with us here. We've got one more to introduce, and then we can kind of roll into some of our questions here. Emma Richman's father passed away from Alzheimer's disease, and her mother is in the early stages of the disease, so she's in the trenches with it. She also has a 6-year-old daughter who is a caregiver to her mother, along with her husband. And she has worked as a teacher with gifted and talented kids. How are you doing today, Emma?
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it'll be a fun show because this is just such a cool project that you all worked on together. Max, I'm going to just throw this question out to you first. And can you tell me why you pulled in Carolyn and how Emma also fits into the book?
So basically, Mrs. Given was my middle and high school English teacher, and we developed a really close friendship. And when I really decided that I wanted to write a book explaining Alzheimer's to children, I thought that she would be one of the first people she would be like the best person to write it with, because she has gone through this caregiving role, but also like she's funny and she's talented with words, and like she's really good at explaining things to people. And she's never really dark. She's always happy and just bouncing off the walls.
And how about Emma? How does she fit into all this?
So I've known her since I started writing on the Alzheimer's Reading Room, and like we had a really close friendship, and some of like the events in the book are kind of inspired by her experiences.
Okay. With her and her daughter?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then I think what we're going to do is talk a little bit more, and again, I'm going to throw this one back to Max initially, but, you know, I'm assuming that you became interested in writing due to your great-grandma. Can you give us a little more insight as to, you know, I mean, you've jumped in with both feet and your whole body into going into research, doing a charitable organization, writing a book. I mean, you are an extreme advocate at a very young age. So what got you there? How did you land in that space?
I've always believed if you have the ability to help others, you have the responsibility to do so. And I've always really wanted to help other people. And my great-grandmother was kind of, at least when I was very young, like another mother to me. And then when she in the later stages of her disease, she was more like a sibling. And so we were very, very close. And so when I visited her in like nursing homes and in hospitals, I saw her and other patients doing jigsaw puzzles, and they were calmer and less agitated. So a few years after her death, I realized that I wanted to really help these people. So I researched this, and I saw that it can help, like doing cognitive activities can help lengthen the time that an Alzheimer's patient remains functional in society. So I decided to start collecting jigsaw puzzles and distributing them to hospitals and nursing homes and memory cafes around the world. And so that's kind of where everything started, and since then I've really discovered that this is my calling, and I've started doing research, and I've written a book, and everything's followed from there.
Okay, great. Now, Emma, can you give us a little more insight as to your journey with dementia? I know I had noted both your parents have been diagnosed with the disease.
That is correct. My mother did not have the disease in 2008, but my father did pass away from the disease then, and I was always turning to the Alzheimer's Reading Room, which is a fantastic support group online. And one day Bob DeMarco, the leader of the website, posted information about Max Wallack and Puzzles to Remember, and I decided a good way to get out of the loss, the depression from the loss of my father would be to give back and to help. Like Max says, to those much has been given, much is expected. And I wanted to get involved in donating puzzles, especially to the Veterans Home where my father was located at the end of his life.
Okay, wonderful. And Carolyn, have you been personally touched by dementia at all in your family or friends?
No, not specifically until very recently, and it's so interesting that you should ask, because I within the past weeks, had been contacted by someone who's exactly my age, who was newly diagnosed, and we're not that terribly old, we're in our mid-50s, but she had been diagnosed as a young Alzheimer's patient, and ironically, she contacted me to help her with her parents. She was struggling with her own diagnosis and a potential clinical trial that she was doing all the consent forms for, at the same time that her father had just been released from the hospital with pneumonia and a recent diagnosis of dementia, and her mother was also displaying symptoms of dementia. So having known that years ago in my town I had worked for the Council on Aging as their director, where my role was largely to refer patients out to a variety of resources, she thought that I may be able to help her. And coincidentally, as it turned out, that day was the day that our book arrived. I got my sample copies that very day. So I took a copy over to my friend, and what a joy to be able to watch them actually read through this book together as a family. All three of them huddled over this little, purple paperback, fascinated as they turned the pages. So my experience specifically with dementia has only recently been that, along with years ago being the Council on Aging director and just referring people out. Caregiving, however, is a kind of universal experience where I think the facilities that we work with, hospitals, care providers, can create a giant nebula of data and even confusion. So I felt very, very strongly that the opportunity to contribute to Max's book was very, very powerful for me. Even as an adult, especially I think as an adult, some of the conflicts were evident early on in both my caregiving experiences for my mother. Over a period of 5 years, she had 2 different forms of incurable cancer, and now my husband has been diagnosed as of a year ago, August, with multiple myeloma. So just an interesting experience. You should ask about Alzheimer's, because my friend was recently diagnosed in her 50s along with 2 parents with dementia. But it's, I think, not surprising that caregiving comes with its own frustrations regardless of the diagnosis.
And I totally agree. And I think, my belief is that this disease is here to hit us worldwide and kind of slap us up against the face and, to do things differently. But I think the lessons taught in this disease are so applicable in all areas of our life. And so it's interesting that your friend at such a young age was diagnosed, because, again, that's one of those myths where it's just old people in wheelchairs, in a catatonic state, which is not true.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's a big, big piece of this. Max, can you tell us what, did you have like an epiphany one day that just said, I need to write this book, or how did it come to be?
So I was thinking about writing a book. I've been thinking about writing a book for a long time, and the day I asked Mrs. Given to be my co-author, and she said yes, within 2 hours of her accepting to be my co-author, I had a draft, and I sent it to her, and over a few months we really worked it out. But there was a long time that it was in my head, and then in one day it was just on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Carolyn, were you surprised that in 2 hours you had a draft?
Oh, God, no. No heavens. When I met Max 8 years ago, she was only 9 and in our 6th grade brand new startup charter school. And back then, whatever Max set his mind to was pretty much yielded within minutes. So just a very industrious and hardworking kid and adult. So from the moment I said I would love to participate, and then seeing the turnaround be kind of hours later, I was like, well, no, I'm not surprised. And it was kind of interesting because he had so many ideal analogies and explanations. They were elegant and simplistic. They honored children. It was quite lovely. And the real only thing he needed, which I think is, again, going back to irony, he had originally thought that my humor essays and being someone that bounces off the walls would be able to add some levity to an otherwise difficult topic to share with children. That's not what my role ended up being. It was sort of interesting. I received this instant manuscript, and it hit me how gifted he is and how talented, but it also hit me that this was sort of the paper and pen manifestation of something that really had been rattling in his head for a couple years, because as a teacher, I could see, well, it needs a story arc, it needs a timeline. Children need to ground themselves on, September is the start of the school year. We need to add a couple holidays, really seated on a timeline with seasons and things and dates that kids could relate to. But anyway, my irony in my part was that I feel like I did the exact opposite from what Max initially asked for. I noticed that Julie as a protagonist was persistently kind of brave and stalwart and lovely and a very real young character. But as an adult myself, I'd experienced frustrations and even occasionally anger. So I had suggested to Max that perhaps Julie should have something bad happen where she actually becomes angry. And we tossed the idea around whether it should be, Julie's birthday gets sort of ruined, or something at school, or if it's Halloween. And it fit just nicely that Halloween was a perfect time because it fits so well with Alzheimer's patients sort of visually and cognitively misperceiving something they see. So poor little Julie is prepared to enjoy trick-or-treating in her Halloween costume, and unfortunately her grandmother becomes frightened by that costume. And so we allow Julie to express her frustration and her anger. But the most important lesson for children reading that is that all caregivers, regardless of age, are going to become angry and frustrated and frightened, and anger is really okay, and it's okay to express it in healthful and appropriate ways, as long as we know we're angry at the disease and not at the patient. And I think that was a very powerful part of the book, and ironically, I was very angry at some of the systems I was going through at the time. So it worked out very well that we could tuck that in at that moment because it was a big part of my life then.
Well, good. Now, Emma, you have a small child, and
yes.
Can you tell us, your thoughts regarding this book, and how did your daughter respond to it?
This book has been an incredible tool for my daughter from day one. Some of the, a lot of the drawings and illustrations come from some photographs that I had sent to Max from time to time with little things that have been going on in our life. And, for example, my daughter likes to cut my mother's food, her chicken and steak or whatever, and I sent Max a picture of it, and it's actually an illustration in the book. One of the ideas that Max mentions is using a red plate to make the food more visually appealing, and we actually had a red plate that my daughter has, so now we use that when Grandma comes over. And some of the incidents with redirecting, for example, the repetitive questions that are asked. Julie's technique is to just simply, in a very calm voice, keep responding to the questions and then mention how much she loves Grandma.
Right.
And Haley has done that on her own, but now she's a little more aware that this is something that will happen with Alzheimer's patients, and she uses that redirecting technique more often. And another incident, which was amazing because it came straight from the book and it happened in our life, is we have an elderly cat who doesn't have any teeth. She's of no harm to anyone. She jumped on a chair right next to Grandma, and Grandma took her cane and very roughly pushed her off the chair. And Haley was devastated about her beloved cat being pushed off the chair. And then I immediately turned to page 19 in the book, and we reread where it mentions that sometimes Grandma becomes frightened by silly little things. It's because they look different to her. Maybe the little kitten looks like a ferocious lion. So the light bulb went off in Haley's head, and she came back after crying and everything, and she told Grandma, "Grandma, I do not want you to hurt Althea with your cane. She is an old cat without any teeth, and she cannot hurt you. She's not a ferocious lion. Don't worry." And she gave Grandma a big hug, and Grandma was very relieved and said, "Okay, Haley," and hugged her, and all was well. So I think this book was incredible because if it, wasn't a resource that we could turn to, it may not have been so calmly dealt with. I mean, I would have just tried to think on my own quickly how to fix the situation, but the book was so useful. I mean, as an educator, I always use books as a teaching tool, so it was a wonderful resource to have at the time.
Yeah, this is one book of very few, I can count them on one hand, that I won't lend out to anybody because I know how powerful this is, and I want to be able to share it with people when I'm speaking. I want to be able to, physically have it as a resource and a reminder because things come up all the time. The book is extremely simple, and I love that about it. It's written in, I know it's a children's book and it's there to help kids, but I think it's going to help a lot of adults slow down and look at things different, because I think as parents sometimes we absorb things through the teaching of our children. Say as I say, or do as I say, not as I do type thing. And as adults, sometimes we're not as respectful or as compassionate, because we're trying to stay on schedules and we take things very seriously. And I think this book just shows us how we can slow down and really be so much more compassionate and efficient and loving at the same time. So I just think it's absolutely brilliant. The stories and the lessons that are told in this book. I think you've all just done a beautiful, beautiful job with it. Max, what has the response been from the public? Are they all like me? I mean, because I have not heard one negative on this book. I mean, everybody is just, loving it. So
yeah, and
what's
actually
it been like?
Just last night, I've been talking with this toy store in Singapore who has a special part of their store for helping the elderly, and they want to purchase 40 books. And those are mostly just to give away. Yeah, it seems really amazing.
Wonderful. Well, we do have a caller on the line, so let me pull them in. I've got somebody here on a 561 number. 561, you're live. If you want to state your name and your comment or question.
Hello, everybody. It's Bob DeMarco.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I'm listening in, and I just want to start by saying, really wonderful, great attitude. Really pretty moving to me. And I say to the writers and all of you, like Max, I've been thinking about this problem with children, and we've kind of interacted on it on the blog. Parents, well, you can do the math. You can take the number of persons living with Alzheimer's and then try to figure out how many, children there are, grandchildren, and straight down the line. And the numbers are, and for the most part, parents really don't have any idea what to do, whether to communicate with their children, whether to tell them. And I don't think any of this is a secret to us right here, Laurie or your guest. But in the world, I continue to meet people, and this, particularly, it seems like with younger onset Alzheimer's, where there's young children, kind of a vicious problem, because the parent doesn't know what to do. And every time I've run across somebody who maybe had a 6 or a 9-year-old child, and of course Max was around 6 while he was caring for his great-gramps, they often turn to their school, and this is where I'm getting to my point. So they'll turn to the school for some help. And every time I've encountered this where I asked, did you get any help from school, the answer has always been resounding no.
Yep.
So it's my belief and my feeling that somehow, some way, this book needs to make it into our schools and primarily into the hands of guidance counselors. They need to have it.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. This is Carolyn again. And in fact, I've spoken to several guidance counselors with whom I'd worked over the years and sent them a copy of the book and also the press releases and asked them specifically, is this something that you would find useful, of utility, and they just could not express what a poverty of data and support materials currently exists. So that's a huge need, and I'm so delighted that you brought that up. I think we all know that, families, certainly assisted living, nursing, but school systems, guidance counselors, physicians certainly, and pastors. But as an educator, my heart goes to the guidance counselor end.
Yes, and as a classroom, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Emma.
Oh, I was just going to say, as a classroom teacher, there's also a poverty of books dealing with dementia. There are 0 books around.
Yes.
So as a classroom teacher for the gifted and talented 3rd grade, this will be a wonderful, wonderful resource, and I can't wait to read it to my students and have a discussion. And especially Max has an illustration in the book that shows how the nerve synapses send the messages and the contrast between a healthy brain and a diseased brain. He uses the metaphor of a pitcher and a catcher in baseball, and how the signal goes smoothly in a healthy brain, and how the pitcher can barely throw the ball and it just lands, and the catcher can't even catch it in an unhealthy nerve. So that will definitely spark the interest of the inquisitive minds, and it'll tap into a subject that I think all children in all schools and all curriculums should be aware of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think, too,
why I wrote the book.
What a great example, too, that Max is a gifted child and what he has done in such a short, I mean, it's just a nice way to introduce, you know, what someone has done. The other thing I think this book could be used for, I mean, I would love to see it in libraries for storytelling time. I think it's something that assisted livings could actually invite families in and say, we're going to do a storytelling time. Bring your kids and grandchildren.
Yeah.
And promote the book that way, too, because, you know, they struggle with their family councils and interactions. And so I think that could be a beautiful, beautiful way. But and same with employee assistance programs. This would be a great resource for them. I mean, it's endless. So if you're out there in the business community listening, you know, go buy this book. Stock up. Get this on your websites as a resource. It is absolutely incredible, and it has lessons for all of us. Even though it's written as a children's book, it has lessons.
There's one assisted living facility that actually has received 37 copies of it, and every single person living there has a copy.
That's wonderful. That's
very
wonderful.
Neat. Very, very.
And, you know, I don't think that back when Max was doing market research prior to launching even the concept of the first manuscript, he'd really saturated himself with as many books that he could possibly find that were out there. This book is truly unique. It truly is. I researched adult books and children's books right alongside him, and this is just so incredibly powerful. You know, even the illustrations, and I don't know if Max's family will be horrified that I'm going to publicly divulge the secret. Is it okay if I divulge the secret, Max?
Oh, what? Yeah, sure.
I'll take that as a yes. So, early on, we had talked about what kind of illustrator to either involve or hire or consult with, and we just couldn't really settle together on somebody that really heard what Max's concepts were. And as it turns out, he decided that, you know, his own family was probably the best resource. They had all been a part of his entire experience growing up from age, 5 through 9, 10, while his grandmother was with them. And he explained beautifully to them the visuals that he could see in his mind, and I think they, as sort of an almost factory assembly line family team, set out to sketch. Someone else would color in, somebody else would add shading, and that's how the illustrations came about. None of them wanted any credit for the book, which I think is too bad, because the illustrations are absolutely brilliant. But that's another feature of this that's so unique. This is a whole family project, and it's very moving to me to see that that these very powerful images are a part of Max and the love that his family shares as well.
Yeah,
I agree.
It's absolutely wonderful. And I want to thank Bob DeMarco with the Alzheimer's Reading Room for calling in and bringing that point up, because it's so valid. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Alzheimer's Reading Room, you definitely have to check it out. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource filled with just a ton of great information, wonderful interaction for people. Let's go to another question here, because we're down to 20 minutes already. Time is just kind of flying here. I'd like to get from each of you, what is your favorite? Because what's your favorite lesson in the book? And Carolyn, I'm going to let you go first, and then Emma, and then Max.
I think, it's got to be about clinical trials and the positive look to the future, the hope that one day it will be either curable or much more manageable, that through clinical trials and research, such as Max himself has grown into becoming, is going to one day yield something better than what's going on now. Even though Max had planned on, I think, including the clinical trial for Julie's grandma inside his book, at the time my husband and I were investigating a clinical trial option, and I know it was unrelated, but I couldn't help feel a connection, because the amount of hope that we felt and the amount of hope that I think Alzheimer's patients and families should feel about things right around the corner. Well, the work that Max is investigating is evidence that I think there are clear pieces of data out there indicating there are game changers afoot. So to me, the best part of the book is how it ends in a very hopeful way for the future.
Okay, wonderful. And Emma, do you have a favorite story in the book?
It's so difficult to choose because there are so many different areas that I'm very, very in love with. I mean, the ending, towards the end where Julie has hope, because I think hope is what gets us through the day, how she has hope of growing up and being a scientist and feeling that she could be proactive in researching a cure or treatment or something, and it gives you strength to know that you could do something about it. And that scene that I mentioned before about the repetition, because I think a lot of caregivers go through that quite a bit of losing their patients, and they just simply don't know that just telling someone you love them could stop that need, because, we can analyze over and over again why they repeat. There are many reasons for it, and redirections is such a simple technique, and everyone can use it.
Great. How about you, Max? Do you have a favorite?
So I think both of you took my favorite lessons away, but I also really think that there might be a lot of kids who think that it's somehow their fault or somehow they're responsible for some of it, and I'm trying to show that they're not responsible for it and that they shouldn't blame themselves for what's happening. And it's not like because they did something, it's because this other person has something wrong with their brain. It's not even that the other person is doing something like consciously on purpose. The disease is doing it.
Wonderful. I want to make sure that we have time to talk a little bit, Max, about your Puzzles to Remember, and how would people get involved with you if they wanted to donate or if they were in need of puzzles? What should they do?
They can contact me by email, and my email is basically PuzzlesToRemember@gmail.com. It's on the bottom of my website. You can just contact me, and usually what I do now is not as much physical pickups and drop-offs. I do a lot of of coordinating where other people can bring their puzzles. And then there's also a lot of Springbox puzzles that have really been able to help a lot of people, which are specifically designed for people with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Okay. So you do both recycled puzzles and then new puzzles, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, because it's nice to know. I remember my daughter when she was 5 coloring with her grandma, and I didn't know who was having more fun or who was more proud of their pictures, and they were just so content and so happy. It was just really fun to see. So I'm sure the puzzles do the same thing. How about your research? Can you share with us where things are at with research?
So we're doing a few different things. We're looking a little bit about male-female differences in the development and prognosis of Alzheimer's. We just recently got a paper accepted talking about ACE inhibitors and their varying abilities based on ApoE4 genotype or ApoE genotype. And then what we're really working on right now is using a natural hormone and a synthetic analog and giving that to people both as a test for Alzheimer's in the MCI stage and as a treatment for people in both the MCI and AD stage. And it's at least in mice we've tested the test in people, and it looks really good, and it looks really good for the treatment in mice too. And we want to start doing a clinical trial in people for the treatment too, and it really seems like it can really show. It can basically take it out of the brain and take it out of the body.
Okay. Can you explain to people what MCI is? Because not all listeners probably know.
So it's just mild cognitive impairment. So it's kind of like the stage where you have some memory difficulties, but you don't have like Alzheimer's yet. You kind of have a few like things that you think are somehow a little bit different from what you used to have, but are not like necessarily Alzheimer's, and you don't have anything. You don't have any cognitive deficits. You might just think that you're thinking a little bit differently, and only about half of everyone who's diagnosed or who is in the MCI stage will progress to Alzheimer's disease.
Okay. So that's a big relief for many. People get so confused with all the terms, and and for me, I kind of come from a personal state where I'm not as concerned about the terms as I am as getting people the support they need for the symptoms that they're having or the struggles that they're dealing with. Because I think like Carolyn said, there's so many overlaps when it comes to giving care, and I just think what you are doing is just amazing. Now, do you have any thoughts of writing a second book?
What a funny question. I actually had a dream last night that was going to be a question. And I woke up laughing like, oh, it's too early. No one will ever think of asking about a sequel. So, yes, the answer is yes.
Okay, so she's on board. Are you, Max?
I think eventually I will write another book, yes.
That is too funny. Do you have anything in mind, Carolyn, in terms of what this book would look like, or?
Well, in my dream, I was thinking about Julie and how in the future, I mean, we've ended this book where Julie is probably finishing first grade, second grade, and her grandma has entered a clinical trial. I think a follow-up of that clinical trial might be a nice way to sort of take a look back and see what's happening as Julie goes into grades 3 or 4 or 5, so that perhaps the next book could extend to a different cohort, a different age level. Yeah, that's where I was at with that. Because I think Max has been very, very generous about explaining to me some of his research work with mice, which I could never explain. I listen and I kind of understand, but there really are some promising things going on in his laboratory. And it could be that perhaps next year he might be able to fold some of that data into a book. I think by then some of it may be published. And so we can even share how children can feel free to avail themselves of research. I mean, even though it's very high level and hard for kids to understand, the data is out there. Excuse me. And so being able to sort of connect Grandma's progress with a potential clinical trial, it may not cure her, but it may arrest some of the progression, and that can give families hope. So that was what my dream was about. But again, that was all my subconscious, so I haven't thought enough about it awake.
I think that's a really good idea.
Thank you, Max. Just sharing it now live.
Well, once you say it, it kind of takes on a life of its own. I would love to see a series. I mean, I remember, and I kind of giggle now because my great aunt had dementia. And when I was 13 years old, I went to the nursing home one day with my mom and my brother, and she knew both of them and not me. And I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. I felt like I was the closest one to her, and here, I must have done something wrong, and nobody could explain what happened to me. It was just, that's what happens when you get old. And I remember crying for 2 weeks. I was so sad and not understanding, and I remember saying to myself, I don't ever want anyone to feel that kind of pain and that kind of rejection, because that's what I felt. I felt that she was rejecting me. It wasn't explained to me in terms of a true disease or how I could deal with it. I mean, it was just kind of an end of life type thing. And,
right. And that's such a critical age. My goodness, 13 is just, that's very horrifying, and that lasts a lifetime, that experience.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that we could do in a sequel to be able to explain those circumstances, I think would be marvelous.
I think that's one of the reasons why I tried to write the book, to explain to children that it's really not anyone's fault, it's the disease's fault.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember Max telling me maybe years ago or I can't remember, but he had shared that he was one of the few people that his great-grandmother consistently knew. And that was truly a blessing for Max, and I think gave him a great deal of a sense of control and some empowerment in that process. But that's another example of how idiosyncratic, how unexpected and inexplicable some of these experiences can be, and especially for children. And certainly it is not their fault or within their control.
Well, go in. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, as Julie's mom, in quotations, I would love to see the book continue and see what happens to this young girl as she grows up and how she's faced with more challenges that might be more like teenager-like. And and as you had mentioned, the publishing of possible some of the information and just seeing where this young girl grows up and where it leads her and her grandmother. So
exactly, I think even publishing some URLs, different resources that kids can avail themselves of that are sound and reputable. But I think that so it becomes more of a factual resource as well for the future of those readers and their parents.
Yeah. Well, I go into the schools, or I used to. I don't do it so much anymore, but I used to go in and speak about Alzheimer's disease. It kind of started out with aging and illness, and then it rolled into Alzheimer's disease. And I would take we joined 2 classes together for a 2-hour session. And it's very, very powerful stuff. And it was amazing how many families were affected by this. But the kids, and these were high school kids, were not told what was going on. Yet their whole life was turned upside down because family schedules and priorities had changed, and they felt really outed, as a member of the family, and they felt really angry that they weren't informed and they couldn't help and they wanted to.
And they wanted to.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they might have been, well, you watch Grandma, but that's all that was told, and they knew that there was much more that they could do in different ways if they were let in. But parents were trying to protect them instead of looking at this as a natural, kind of life lesson that, everyone's dealing with. And so some of the schools now, some of the kids have said, we want a support group, and they've approached their school districts. And some of the school districts, some of the schools have said no, and a couple of the kids have gone over and above up to the school district saying, this is a need. You've got a group for the gay and lesbian, you've got a group for this, you've got a group for that. I want a group that's dealing with this. And so it's kind of interesting to see the kids take a stand and say, that's not fair. We need help too.
Exactly.
And maybe one of the reasons why I've been able to start doing these things at a young age is because my parents always shared with me what was going on with my great grandmother. They never really hid anything from me.
Yeah.
That's
a very good point.
Very important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, very important. That's for sure. That's for sure. Well,
and that brings up another point as to why this particular book and its perspective is so unique. There aren't that many young children who imprinted at such a young age on that whole experience where they were brought in and where things were explained to them. So, it makes the book all the more useful and precious.
Exactly. And it's, like I said, you have just done it in such a beautiful, a real life. I love that you share all the emotions. You had mentioned about emotions. They're not good, they're not bad, they just are. It's our reaction to them. So let's talk about the emotions because they're real, and that's where we get stuck a lot of times. And we need to have. I think it's just so critical to have these conversations and to not be stigmatized by them, not to ignore it or not to be ashamed of it. We shouldn't be ashamed of dealing with a medical condition.
Not at all, and we shouldn't be ashamed to have our reactions and feelings. We're human. In many ways, we're dealing with grief. We're grieving over the loss of something that once was, and trying to adapt to this new way of living. Just yesterday, I discovered that a lot of health insurance plans provide case management for incurable diseases or complex diseases. And here I had been this caregiver for my mother for 5 years and one for my husband for a year, and only just now learned that I could have had case management support all this time. So I'm not certain how it works with Medicare, Medicaid, but these are resources that I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know could have helped me years ago. So being able to kind of be brave and look things up and trying to find those resources when you're very frustrated or fragile or vulnerable, that's really what prompted me to go forward and seek more support. And lo and behold, it was there. So these emotions play a very vital role. If we listen carefully to them and respond to them, I think they can be very helpful, but they certainly are real.
I totally agree. Max, can you tell us, in wrapping up, what are your future goals?
I want to become a geriatric psychiatrist, and I want to continue doing research. I want to interact with patients and their caregivers, but also still keep doing research. I feel like really there's a lot of focus on patients with Alzheimer's, and there's not as much focus on caregivers. And I think that really helping caregivers is and supporting caregivers is really important. And I feel like also just combating this disease from various fronts is really important.
I agree. I would like to see more money going into caregiver support and studies. Because if the caregivers aren't strong and if they don't have the support they need, it just impacts everything. Mm-hmm. And like Carolyn said, there's resources out here, nobody tells us about them. So they sit down and they have consultations for diabetes or if you're overweight, and they do the one-on-one counselings, and that should just be a given with this disease at this point. And if it's done in a partially in a group and partially in an individual place, I think there's different ways to work this, but there's so much help out there. And I know for me in my 30-year journey, I didn't even know what questions to ask, just like you were saying. And so that's one of the reasons, I formulated Alzheimer Speaks and have built a resource directory is to help people share information, what is it that we've learned, and work collaboratively together. This is just too big for any of us to tackle alone.
Certainly.
I love the collaboration that you guys have done on the book, and just the way, it's, we've got 3 of you on the line here with us on the show, but there were so many others that were part of the process, and I just think that that's beautiful, and it's reflective in the book in and of itself. Emma, is there anything else that you would like to say in wrapping up?
Just to give a quick example, the two neighborhood girls who live right next door to us heard the book as well, and they were able to understand my mother when she comes over, which is frequent, and when they are visiting as well, if Grandma is behaving a certain way, they clearly understand what's going on, and they're actually incorporating some of the techniques as well. So that's why this book carries over not just to children that have a loved one, but just all children should be tolerant of people that are different and to understand. And now these two girls, one's 5 and one's 8, they understand what's going on. Haley's grandma has AZ, and they're understanding what's involved and how to help the situation when they're here.
Well, and I think the beauty of kids is that they're so accepting. You know, they're just, I remember when my daughter was in school and the teacher's like, you know, she's just so helpful. You know, she's just, someone's in a wheelchair or someone's disabled or someone's struggling, and I'm like, she doesn't see what we see. You know, she just sees another person that needs help that's a little bit different, but it's just no big deal. Right. And then we destroy that as our kids get older. You know, we create all this judgment and these blocks. True. And I think I think the book does a beautiful job of breaking that down. How about you, Carolyn? Anything else you'd like to say? I know you guys all have timelines, and our hour is up here. I could talk to you guys all day because I think it's just a fascinating work that you've done.
Well, we're very proud of the book, certainly, and really look forward to it being in the hands of as many different people, facilities, resources as possible, because I think it's that useful. And I think my takeaway from today is I may just go off and start thinking about a sequel.
I think you already are.
I think I already am, yeah. But thank you so much for your radio show. I just can't express adequately how pleased I am that you give us all voice, because it's so important. It's so important to not feel abandoned, isolated, alone, that all of us are here working together, and there are so many beautiful resources where we can support each other, and this book is certainly one.
I just want to say thank you, Lori and Carolyn and Emma and Bob and Carol Larkin, on what you've done for me in my life.
Likewise.
Absolutely, likewise.
More than welcome. You are just one amazing individual, and you are just this huge bright light that we're just all so gifted to know. And so you're doing amazing work.
Agreed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Max, as well. And Emma, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. Thank you so much again for having me here.
Well, great. And for those of you, check out this book. The title, again, is Why Did Grandma Put Her Underwear in the Refrigerator? And you can just Google that, or you can Google Max Wallack, Wallack, or Carolyn Given, and you'll be able to find that book very, very easily. I know it's up there on the Amazon list. It looks like it was doing really good, so I'm excited about that, and hopefully this will give it a little more boost, and more people will spread the word of the value of the book and the multiple ways that it can be used.
Absolutely.
And then if you're interested in getting a hold of Max, just go to Puzzles, or you can email him at PuzzlesToRemember@gmail.com, or he's on Facebook as well. Thank you all for being with the show. I really greatly appreciate your time with us today.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Okay, bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
For our kind of a midway break here, I just want to highlight a few things. I'm still waiting for my next guest to call in. But I wanted to point out our last radio show was with Us Against Alzheimer's, and we talked about all the variable networks that they have and that you might want to take part in. There is an activist group, there's a research group, there's a women's network. They're going to be rolling out a Hispanic and an African American network as well. And they are just doing some really wonderful, wonderful things. And if you feel like you're an advocate and have a voice or want to become one, you're going to want to connect with them because the information that they push out is incredible. They're just a fantastic resource. They are very much connected politically, and they make it very simple for us to pass it on to our audiences. It's kind of a one-click thing, and they are driven to find a cure for this disease. So that show was just August 6th. Our next show coming up will be on the 20th, and for that show, I'm going to be interviewing an attorney, and we're also, for the second half of the show, we're going to be talking about daycare, what that entails and what you can expect with that and how it can work differently for models. Yesterday, we had our dementia chat, and our featured expert living with dementia was Harry Urban. And Harry talked in depth about friends and family and their importance in terms of relationships. And, of course, the audience chimed in as well. They're always just a great conversation. And those you can find on the blog or on the website. All of the sessions are recorded. I just got some lovely notes about the conversation that we had, again, yesterday on that. And our next dementia chats, again, these are free webinars, will be August 27th, and that will be at its regular time, which is 3 p.m. Eastern Time, or 3 p.m. Eastern Time, or 2 p.m. Central, and that's noon Pacific Time. On the blog, there are a few articles that I just wanted to point out. Carol Larkin, who Max Wallack had mentioned, did just a really nice article talking about what's the difference between dementia and delirium, and people get that confused all the time. I also posted a video that was done by CNN World, The Untold Stories, and that's about the Dementia Village. There was another one I had posted earlier. This one just takes a look at it from a little different angle, breaks it down, I think, in a more practical fashion to look at. And, of course, there are several other articles out there as well. I was interviewed by Encore Living yesterday, and then also Dr. Gordon Atherley with the Caregivers Unite program, and so I'll be pushing those interviews out. Michael Ellenbogen also was with me on the interview yesterday with Dr. Gordon Atherley, and he's up in Canada and just does a great show with that. I'm not sure if my second guest is going to be able to make it today or not, so I'll give him a few more minutes, and if not, we'll just wrap the show up early, and we'll have James Creasy on another time. But hopefully he'll be able to make it. For those of you that aren't familiar with James is a passionate individual who has done amazing things over the past few years. His dad was afflicted with dementia, and about 5 years ago on a summer vacation, he discovered a new connection, a new way to make a connection with his father, and that was by playing croquet. Just a simple game. Put smiles on his dad, whose name is Maxwell's face. And it kind of broke the silence and the confusion of the disease. And so the family decided to make that an active part of their way to enjoy what they call their papa. And since then, James has been running a weekly croquet program for the Alzheimer's Association in Denver, Colorado, and he founded a company called Jiminy Wicket, and that is spelled Jiminy, and then Wicket, WICKET, and it's all about making smiles for people living with dementia. And a year ago, he created a program called Through Hoops to Hope. He just has a very, very positive outlook on life in general, and everything that is going on with this. Just an incredible man. He actually flew up to Minnesota to set up our memory cafe, Arthur's Memory Cafe, with the Jiminy Wicket set, and we were able to play, and it was so much fun. And it's an adaptable croquet, so even if someone's in a wheelchair, they can still play. You can play it inside, you can play it outside. But the unique thing through Hoops for Hope is that it's an intergenerational game. He has started this in high schools and colleges, and merged it with senior communities, and it's been developed and delivered proof in the concept of itself, because he's done it in over 100 schools and colleges coast to coast across the country. And he's also performed this in 10 schools in the UK and 5 in Australia. And what they have found is that there's just this great, great connection with the person with dementia playing croquet with this intergenerational team. And so it's been pretty fascinating. He's actually going to be launching the expansion of his program, and he's going to kick that off with the Jiminy Wicket World Cup at Rockefeller Center in New York City on Friday, September 20th, from 7 a.m. to 11. And he would love for you to come out and play with him and his crew. And it's looking like James isn't going to be able to make the show today. So I think what I'm going to go ahead and do is sign off, and we will just reschedule so that he's able to come and really talk about his program, because it is absolutely brilliant. But I do recommend that you go to his site and check it out, and if you haven't already, JiminyWicket.com. And he's got some great videos, so you'll be able to see exactly what it's all about and go from there. Again, I want to remind you all that if you're looking for an Alzheimer's association anywhere in the world, you can work with Alzheimer's Disease International. They are the organization of organizations. And if you're looking for a trial, the TAU trial, you can go to alzheimersstudies.com and find out more information on that clinical trial. And again, if you want to join the Purple Angel Project, just look them up online, or you can go to my website too and you can find them. But it's a great global symbol that will cut out the confusion that so many of us have with this disease. Until next time, which will be the 20th, we will talk to you soon. Have a blessed week and enjoy your day. Bye now.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sylvester here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.